You could be thinking of it as drawing. You could be thinking of it as painting. But don't have any preconceived notions of what you think it's going to be like, because all it takes is one good way of explaining something that connects with you, and it will unlock an entire new category of work that you might start to make as a result of that. It's happened for me from teachers that I've had that have explained it in a slightly different way, and a world opened up to me of a whole new potential that I didn't even know that I had. And so it's some of this like blockers in your brain that of where you think it's going to be a certain way. If I do this, it's going to be this, or this is the way I've seen people work, so that means that's the way you have to work. That can only hold you back. So I think that open-mindedness and willing to experiment and try new stuff is gonna unlock a lot of potential.
Please welcome the legendary Aaron Limonick back to the Learn Squared podcast. Not only is he back for another episode, Aaron is also back teaching at Learn Squared with 4 new courses that comprise the ink sketching series. The first course, Ink Sketching Fundamentals, is out now. And Aaron shares with us why he picked up his favourite pens and brushes for this course, and how it will help all kinds of students, from those who love working traditionally to those who have never picked up a pen before. So let's get to it and hear more from Aaron himself about the course, and why he loves working traditionally, and how it impacts and influences his own digital workflows. Also, we hear how the worlds of Graffiti and Venice, Italy are connected, and plenty more. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and delighted to welcome on the legend and returning Learn Squared instructor with new courses, Aaron Limonick. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a good time, as always. So I'm excited to get going and chat.
So we spoke quite a lot recently for reasons we'll mention soon. Obviously, you're back at Learn Squared Shores with not 1, but 4 courses, which will actually make you the first Learn Squared instructor to have that many courses. So congratulations on that. But the last time we spoke, that was when you dropped your session, and it's been a good few years since. And obviously for the listeners as well, it's been a good few years for them as well. So again, like yourself, looking forward to chatting, talking about journey, what you've been up to since, and the course. But before we get into all of that good stuff, if you wouldn't mind just letting everybody know who you are and what you do.
Well, where do we start? My name's Aaron Limonick, as you said. I'm concept art director working for Activision, and I've spent the last 21 years as a concept artist and art director now, running through the ranks of the concept art world, kind of everything from starting out in 2004 as a character designer all the way to, doing multidisciplinary, to being an environment designer, to everything in between. I've done kind of all that. And that brings us to, current times where I've been kind of on the sidelines. I've been doing traditional art this entire time since I was a teenager. Really, that's been my background. So I didn't really, I've done a lot of instruction. I've done a lot of workshops. I've done a lot of work in the educational community, but I never talk about my traditional background that much. So that's kind of where it brings us to date. It's actually more relevant than ever, in my opinion.
Perfect. Just to give people a snapshot, as very decorated artist, especially in the entertainment industry, as well as with the skill sets that you have, which a lot of people will find out by the end of this episode, for sure. But just give, for the new students that are jumping in for the first time, completely fresh, just give them a quick snapshot of some of the stuff that you've worked on.
Well, I started out at a studio called Neversoft Entertainment. I worked on Tony Hawk, Guitar Hero, this game called Gun, which is kind of like a Western GTA type of game. It was in, I guess you would call it the old guard of the games industry. It was very much a time in which game development was much more of the Wild West and not as much of a corporate world as it is now. Working on those games was just so fun because the game development was really, really quick. Moving on from that, I worked at High Moon Studios, which now is an Activision studio as well, which was really fun because there we were under Vivendi Universal in the beginning, and we got to work on all these pitch projects, which will never see the light of day, unfortunately. But then the big project that we worked on a prototype, which led us to be invited to work on the Transformers franchise for Activision and Hasbro, which was a reimagining of the Cybertron universe, which was like a childhood dream come true. You know, if you told me my 5-year-old self that I was going to be redesigning the Dinobots and Cybertron, I never would have believed you. And then after that, I worked at Naughty Dog for 12 years working on, you know, I came on when it was, they were working on this little project that didn't have a name, that was like a zombie kind of something or other, and ended up becoming The Last of Us. That was, I had no idea. I thought I was going to work on Uncharted 3. And ultimately they surprised me, and we ended up developing the Last of Us universe from the ground up, basically. From there, I worked on their new multiple, you know, their new stuff that they have going on, which is public knowledge. And then after 12 years, I decided to move on to work at Activision on a new IP and do some really, really fun stuff. So that's where we're at the moment.
But like I said, before all of this, everything in terms of art for you, did it begin with traditional?
Oh yeah, because there was no digital. That's how old I am. There was no, I mean, there was when I was just starting out. It was like in its very early days. But when I went to school, there was no like, here's how to photo bash class. There was no here's modeling in Blender class. There was no such thing. It was very, very early days on that front. And the people that were using 3D software were really the matte painters, and the people that were, you know, my classmate and good friend Steve Messing was like one of the earliest people I've ever met. It was like him and Dylan Cole. You know, he was a student and a kind of protege of Dylan Cole at the time. And all of us were just blown away. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, you're just doing next level work. And that was that was my introduction to like, oh, I bet you artists are going to start doing this more, because the results he's getting out of it are pretty insane. And so the people that were doing matte paintings, they were the ones that were normalizing using 3D in concept art. Because at the time it seemed too tedious to be usable in a quick setting like concept is expected to be in. But the rest of us for a long, long time were just doing everything in traditional. I was lucky enough to be doing as a professional in my early time in my concept career, probably for the first 5 years, doing a good amount of traditional work still on the job, markers, pencil, whatever. And that's not really a thing anymore. I mean, you just can't. It's too slow. It's just too slow. And the digital drawing tools are so good. That's the other thing, which I have to say I do enjoy doing a lot as well. My class, Sketching Anything for you guys for Learn Squared, was a digital sketching class, which I thought was, and I never thought I would enjoy doing that so much, but I actually really, really did. But my background, my first love, definitely traditional media, drawing, painting, everything. I'm a bit of a mixed media artist. I like using everything in combination sometimes, but I've experimented a lot with mixed media. I experimented a lot with what was some of my favorite, like, you know, wet mounting a sketch down on a piece of illustration board and then glazing over it with acrylic and then crystal clearing that and then painting over it with oil and doing glazes on top, and underneath somewhere there's like some charcoal and chalk drawing underneath that you can barely see. But the fact of just layering it up and building it up from this traditional base was, to me, always having something tactile and textural was what I really loved.
Sick. So at the time, obviously, this episode's airing, your brand new course, Ink Sketching Fundamentals, is available now, as well as the opportunity to pre-order the rest of the courses in the catalogue, which cover landscapes, it covers architecture, and it covers advanced techniques. And a lot of the audience listening today will be tuning in. I'm pretty sure, although I don't have the stats in front of me, a vast amount will be digital artists, or those of us who, like yourself now, will be using tools, Blender, 3D software, and whatever else. And a lot of us, similar to yourself, who did also come from like the pre-digital era when it was only analog tools that were available. and gone through that journey and obviously adopted new tools and almost put aside the old ones for the new tools as well. Has traditional medium always been there for you, either in the background, on the side, or have you had those moments where it's kind of been literally put in the drawer and you've let it gather dust and then you get back to it every now and again?
Has traditional always been there for me, you're saying?
Correct. Yeah.
No, I'm sad to say there were stretches of time where it sort of went away, and I was enjoying the journey of learning 3D. I was enjoying the journey of learning these more modern techniques at the time when they were modern, when they weren't. Now it's the status quo. But there was a time where we were all gone the journey. At Naughty Dog is where this happened. For context, we all went through the journey of kind of learning how to use 3D together, and I can get into the details on that a little bit more. But that sort of overtook everything for a while, as everybody around me was captivated by what you can do with it. That things that would have been a nightmare to do, even just painting digitally, but without 3D software, things that would have been an absolute nightmare to do before. And it sort of this opened up this world of possibilities that I think captured all of our imaginations for a while. And I don't know why, because you could say, oh, I wasn't around anybody who's sketching a lot, which isn't true, because my super close friend Cameron Davis was always sketching, and he never stopped sketching. So I'm ashamed to say that there were years that passed where I just kind of never touched a sketchbook, and I stopped drawing. Luckily, when you've put in the kind of mileage that I have, it's kind of like riding a bike. You never really forget how to do it. You need maybe like 1 week of like sketching a little bit, and it just like everything just comes alive in your brain. And so let's try. The most interesting part of that is, I always say the same thing. It's like, I never really knew how much I needed it until I started doing it again. And then I realized like my brain just came alive again, like came back to life. What's really weird, and something that I cover in a lot of my talks or a lot of my workshops and classes and things like that, is that normally you don't get better at things by not doing them, right? That's a classic saying. You're not going to get better at swimming by not swimming, right? That doesn't make any sense. Like, how would you? But something that happens in art that's really interesting is by doing something that is adjacent to what that thing is. So I didn't draw for years and years, really much at all. I couldn't tell you exactly how many years, but a good chunk of time. But in doing all this other work that I had been doing, I was teaching, I was doing a lot of demos, I was doing a lot of digital painting, doing a lot of 3D modeling, which helps you understand how things are built and how these very unexpected synapse connections in your brain, like where you're really making connections between things that ideally are not related. When I came back to drawing, I was actually better at stuff that I was doing before but I wasn't doing it. I wasn't practicing it, but I had gotten better because of other things, which is a very unique thing to artists. I don't know if that exists anywhere else. Like, if you're not training in the gym, you don't get stronger. If you're not playing the guitar, you don't get better at the guitar. It doesn't work like that with stuff that's physical in that way. But for some reason in art, you can feel it. Like, if I were to go back and paint with gouache right now, I'd be really curious to see what I would do, because I haven't painted with gouache in many years. But I'm pretty sure I'd be able to do it just fine because of all the other things that I've been doing, which would, the way your hand moves is there, your sense of touch is there, your eye-hand coordination is there, sense of grouping, and all the sensibilities that go into it are there. But you'd need a week of like, oh, this thing's not drawing the way I remember, or whatever, those weird quirks of traditional media. So it's kind of a long-winded way of saying that despite having taken quite a long hiatus on it, I found some unexpected areas of growth that were really fun. Little known fact, this technique that is all over my Instagram, and this ink brush technique that I have been using for several years now, that wasn't something I did before that. Like, it's not something, oh, how long have you been doing this? Oh, well, at the time I just started. I did it because it was user friendly to bring out to a coffee shop with my buddies and have a sketchbook. And it felt like a more traditional version of markers, but it was not something I did in school. It's not something I did after school. It's kind of funny that way, you know?
Yes. Oh, that's incredible. One of the questions was actually going to be like how just thinking traditionally, being trained traditionally, and all the things that you learn, how that influenced the digital side and those new tools. But it's interesting that you mentioned obviously there's a flip side as well, like how that came back in reverse. Have you dwelt more on that, like thought what that is, or have you just kind of embraced it and just gone along with the ride?
I'm always go with the flow. I'm all like, nothing is ever out of favor with me. Like I'm always willing to go back and use whatever tools. Like it's I don't think anything becomes completely irrelevant ever. Like I think all of it is always part of the, and it can have a place in a number of different ways. You know, we talk about like certain media are very friendly for doing certain things. Like if you're going out landscape painting, yes, you can scribble with a pen and create values and create a look that is really cool, and that's fun. But it's not as friendly as like big chunky brushstrokes of gouache, right? That and going out and painting in Placerita Canyon out there in Agua Dulce or something like that. That's where like everything can have a place, but to me, I like to change it up depending on what I'm doing. Like certain mediums are more fun. Like if somebody were to say, I want to commission from, or I would love to have a painting or maybe let's just say I just want to do a painting in my living room. I wouldn't immediately go to chunky brushstrokes of gouache because we've been there and done that like 100,000 times. I would probably invent some weird mixed media technique that would be like a hybrid of 3 different things that would be like, I can't tell how you did that. What is that thing? I've got a painting over here behind me that I did when I was right out of school, when I was like heavy in my experimental phase. And I did like, what was it? It was like a charcoal drawing on illustration board. Weird already. Then chalk pastel, like smearing the pastel and erasing out of it that rub out technique that you would use in in animation, in VizDev animation. They rub flat values and then they erase highlights out of it and draw back into it. Super fun. So I was doing that. And then on top of that, I started painting gouache and matching the values of the charcoal and the pastel and painting opaquely with gouache, and then put that in a frame to protect it under glass. That's the stuff that's the most fun to me. So like, sorry if I'm not even remotely answering your question. You feel free
super
to
interesting.
Like, hold
Continue.
me
Go
to
ahead.
that.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
But that's where I feel like I thrive the most. I get the most enjoyment out of that. Figuring out something that's a little bit unorthodox and unexpected textures, and why is the gouache not working so well in this area, but then over here it's like the most juicy brush strokes you've ever seen because it's going on top of something that it usually doesn't go on top of. Yeah. Stuff like that. You can't teach it. You just have to find it on your own, you know?
Sick. So obviously that's like a lot of experimentation, and that's just like, because obviously experimentation is a bit of a loose word when it comes to art. It could just be the subject matter you're doing, what you're trying to achieve, but also the techniques and the tools and the mediums, and then like you said, the alchemy in between, like trying to find new kind of elements and what have you. When did that begin? Has that always been there?
Yeah, so I guess something that I probably should have mentioned already, but I didn't, is so I came into having a career not through art at all. I went to art school, and that, which I mentioned, and that's, most people think, oh, all right, you just got this, you got an internship from your your counselor, your student advisor. That was the word I was looking for. No, nothing, zero, nothing even remotely related to that. I found my way into the industry from being a graffiti artist. So most people don't know this unless you know me personally, that starting from the age of about 13 to 23, so about that like 10-year stretch, I was a super active graffiti artist in LA, painting, everything from pretty big murals, you would say, like graffiti murals and big walls that with the collaboration of a bunch of people, all the way to, you know, other things that are quicker that you're not strictly speaking supposed to be doing. And for me, the subculture of graffiti and hip hop and that entire world is like very, very unique and bespoke in and of itself, in the sense that it's all about like this experimental kind of, there's rules sort of, but then it's also kind of about breaking the rules and establishing your kind of unique identity. And so there's like a core spirit to it that's all about going with the flow, you know, people that are MCs like freestyling and breakdancing, and people that are doing graffiti or just painting off the top of their head. Like, if you've ever tried painting something really big, I don't mean like 4 or 5 feet, I mean like really big, an entire wall, and doing it freestyling off the top of your head with a backpack full of spray cans, it's super intimidating at first, and it takes a while to get used to doing that and be able to be comfortable. Just like, I'm just figuring it out as I go. I kind of know roughly where I'm going in my head, but it's sort of, you run into problems when you get there. You're like, oh man, this isn't working out the way I thought, or I don't like these colors next to each other the way I thought I would, or for some reason the paint's kind of clogging all my tips and I have to keep changing, whatever the deal is. But the point I'm making is that it gets you in this mentality of like rolling with the punches, going with the flow, and adapting to adversity as it kind of turns up. So then you get addicted to that, and then you realize like that's kind of like most of the fun of it is the more I plan and the more I measure things out, things get more stiff, and you can be in the mindset of being like essentially like some mural artist where you do a lot of planning in what you're about to draw, you know, bringing the conversation back to, you know, doing drawings in your sketchbook. It's really the same thing. It's just literally 100 times the size on a big wall. But you can plan everything out if you want, but I could tell you it's not going to go the way you want ever. So that idea of like, that idea of being spontaneous and being willing to experiment with different combinations of things and adapting to adversity is to me the coolest thing. I feel like I'm a politician, like I'm not answering your question, and I'm dancing around and going on a long rant that has nothing to do with what you asked.
No, it's perfect. So like, just sticking to that side of things, for example, what is it like having, obviously, graffiti world, obviously the canvas is very different to, you know, your regular sketchbook kind of stuff. What how formative was it for you in terms of you as an artist? Like, what is still left in you today? And do you still do it now, of course?
Yeah. I mean, not on walls, because I just honestly don't have the time. Like, it's a lot of labor and a lot of time to do graffiti walls. But every time I'm on a call, every time I'm on a Zoom call or in a meeting for work, I'm nervously sketching graffiti letters. I'm looking down at like 7 or 8 pieces of paper right now, right down here, that I have in front of me that have letters and all sorts of logo types and graffiti letters, like everything, all the way from scribbles to like more tighter, like little things that I kind of sketch out with my various pens that I always have in front of me. So yes, I still love it. I think about it like almost every day, because it was one of the funnest things to do that most people don't get the chance to be involved in. It's a very, very like weird niche subculture. But it was very formative for me, very formative, because it's super raw. There's nothing else out there that's that raw. Even mural artists, that's very planned. That's very much like, they're not like walking on the side of a riverbank, like down in the wash with a backpack, climbing down ladders and painting in the, you know, some unsanctioned, they don't, that's an experience that is like very, very unique. And I'm glad I did it. As dumb as some of the things were that I did, I'm glad I did at that young age, because they are very formative actually to me.
Just to confirm, how old were you then? Or at least when you started?
14, 13, maybe 13.
How did you fall into that?
Punk.
Was it something that you actually just fell into? Or was this you with the crew that everyone started like, you know, doing that and you just kind of did it? Or because sometimes obviously with certain groups, there's always that one outsider who has to do that specific thing. So what was your story in that regard?
There's like the kids that I got into it through skateboarding. So first I was skating, and in the 90s, like skating and graffiti were kind of like hand in hand, you know, like hip hop skating. That was during that era. You're either like dudes are like wearing high top bands and listening to punk rock. You're in that like Dogtown, like surfer sort of world, or you're in kind of more the hip hop sort of world. And I was more on that side of it, at that point. So hip hop culture, skating, and then like graffiti was just a natural thing. I'm like, oh, I'm an artist. I've always been an artist since I was a little kid. So it seems obvious that I would do this. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't? It's so sick. Look at these guys standing here, like 6 or 7 guys painting these big walls, and they're climbing. It's adventurous. It's sneaking around. It's maybe some athleticism involved in climbing some things, if you will. Okay. You can interpret that how you will. But all those things mixed to me were just like, I'm addicted immediately. It was right up my alley.
And was it literally like a full-on addiction? Like you just, obviously, I guess it kind of is, because like you still think about it all the time now. But what was it like back then? Like, was it just a constant, did it consume everything about your existence almost?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I remember thinking the thoughts that, like, I don't know how I'll ever stop doing this. I remember thinking the thought when I was younger. Obviously, I did. You have kids, you get married, you have real life, you have career. And I can go into how and when I sort of like, I realized my career was I fell in love with my career so much that it actually did overtake the graffiti. But there was a time where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to not do this, because it's just such a good fit. And it's such a fun world. There's things about the world that are not fun. There's like a kind of weird gang adjacent world where it sort of crosses over, and there's people that are, that are involved in other type of activities that I don't want to be involved in anything even remotely like that. But for the most part, most people are just artists. You meet some of the weirdest people in the graffiti world, just like, you see people walking together that are in like the same crew, and you just realize like there's no world where the 6 of you would ever hang out outside of this world. Just the weirdest mixture of people. But that's what's so sick about it. It's like literally the most diverse environment you could possibly be in. And yeah, I was for sure very, very engulfed in it for a long time.
Wow. So obviously, my next question was going to be, I assumed that it would have been like something that you switched to, like when did it switch? But you obviously mentioned that your career kind of took over. So whether it's like parallel things going on with like the career side of art, and how did the career kind of come about? Like, was that a different kind of like process you were going through to kind of like bring to life?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they did overlap in the very beginning. When I was working at Neversoft, I was still painting walls. And then I met this guy who a lot of people will know as Crayola, his name's Greg Simpkins. He's a super famous and rightfully so badass artist that is a fine artist and also a graffiti artist, who I met painting at the Venice Beach pit, the Venice pit, which is an interesting environment that kind of doesn't really exist anymore the way it used to. But he was painting there, and I knew who he was because he's super good. And, you'd see his work on Melrose down there in Hollywood. And I remember talking to him, and I forgot how we started talking, but I was like, dude, I gotta get your info. I want to show you some of my work. Cause I mentioned I went to Art Center at the time, which I did. And he was, being not just a graffiti artist. He was like a real artist. He worked at Treyarch in games already. So I was like, yeah, I'm in school. I'm, working. I want to work in entertainment. I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet. I would have been down to work anywhere. I just wanted to work so badly. I was still in school, obviously. So I talked to him, and he gave me the information of some people at Neversoft, and I got linked up with them, and they wanted me to do a test because I was still in college, still in school. Did the test, stayed up all night for a couple nights, and just did everything I could. I threw everything at it to make sure I did the best possible test, and it was for character design, really. So it's, again, surprising. It's not really my focus, but it's not something that I do because it's my background, right? Like illustration, I spent more time doing figure drawing than I did landscape painting. So it wasn't until much later that I became kind of like more in love with landscape, environment design, set design, whatever. But that's how I got into the industry. A lot of people don't understand that those of us that were like the older millennials, the oldest ones, there was no social media. It's hard to imagine a world, but there was no social media. There's no website. There's no forum. There's no nothing. There's nothing. It's an empty void. It is who you meet. How do you know? You don't like, I don't even know what studios' names are. I don't know where I can work. I don't even know where, how do you apply? Like, apply to what? How would you even know how to? So you talk about scary, like when students express their fears about getting into the industry, I always have a lot to say about that because there's so many tools to do that. But when we were starting, I got in by the most random, most bizarre method that you could possibly find a job. Your parents would tell you like, oh, you're running around. Like you could be working on homework and you're out here painting a wall on Saturday all day. And little would they know that's exactly what is going to get you your job. I would have to say that is very unexpected, but that is how it started for me.
Sick. That's actually quite poetic as well, because in a weird way, like that's kind of the same kind of dynamic, I guess, artists have, but instead of a wall, it's like obviously a digital screen. Like how is that going to get you anywhere? And then obviously careers are formed. But just a good point on career and obviously trying to get work. And I'm from the same era as you. I totally understand exactly what you're saying when it's about the analog era, before social media, before the direct access you can have to artists, and even things like this we're doing now. But at the same time, those things that people can gain now with those tools, you lose kind of some of the stuff that I guess we had to capitalize on in that kind of era. What would you advise to those guys who are trying to make their moves, trying to get their careers, trying to get things in, like from that olden era, or some of the skills, the hard skills that you got from that time? What would you say? Just adapt those and just obviously adapt it towards the methods you're using now, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that the answer is always that there's a couple boilerplate, like generic statements that I think will always be true. Number one, things will always change. Like every era, and I'm old enough and been doing this long enough now where I've had to do it multiple times. That's why a lot of things about technology changing, like to me, I'm like, yeah, so what? This is what, number 4, number 5, that I've completely had to change everything. My whole thing was coming out of school, and I thought I was going to be like a traditional artist, like doing, cool traditional drawings, like working on Pixar, like Finding Nemo or one of these. You look at these art books and it's like, oh, they're all like pastel drawings. That's really cool. I thought I was going to be doing that. By the time I got out of school, I'm like, nope. Everything's gone. That's all totally different. You got to learn photo bashing now. I'm like, wait, what photo bash? There wasn't even a good class for digital painting when I was in college. You want me to learn photo? Like I have learned everything that I know how to do on the job, which makes it pretty much the same thing as it is for everybody else that is in these times now. The difference is, so that's the first part. The second, the first part being always be prepared to change. The second part being, while the addendum to that is like, while you're always forced to change and you have to be expecting to adapt to new things as they come out, the fundamental ideas that you were taught at day one of school are always just as important as they were day one. That never changes. The people that are the best at adapting have the strongest understanding of the fundamentals. So you could make a million different analogies of like martial arts or sports or music or any of those. It would apply the same way. If you were a musician and you were a mixing engineer and you have like a classical background, you can either choose to learn the engineering software, like whatever it was, Logic or Pro Tools, or when those things came out, they were pretty devastating to people that refused to learn it. Yeah. But the people that were the old school folks that did learn it had an incredible, I have to assume, and I know some people that did, had an incredible ability to translate those core fundamentals into more modern techniques. And it's sick when you see someone do that. A great example would be someone like Dylan Cole. He's truly old school, right? And he was doing all this traditional painting. And if you listen to I've seen many of his talks and was lucky enough to do a talk with him at a convention in Paris earlier this year. And you hear him talk and you hear his story and you're like, this is the mentality that will make you just immortal. If you could be like him, where it's like nothing would stop that guy. It doesn't matter what changes. Nothing would ever stop him.
Yes.
And then you hear other people talk that are older, that are more old school. And you hear like this kind of bitter, resisting, this very resistant, very, I don't have a much better way to say it than that, but a very kind of bitter mindset that is a self-defeating attitude where it's like, okay, well, no wonder you're not hearing sorrow stories from someone like Dylan Cole. You're hearing awesome stories because he's awesome and he's not going to be defeated by anything. So what I would just say is like, number one, be expecting to change, be open to change and learning new stuff. And keep those core fundamentals super close to your heart and always be working on those. And that's why I love doing this stuff, because this is the forever fundamental stuff. Like it's never gonna, you're drawing with a pen, you're drawing with a pen, you're drawing with a pen. The technology of pens isn't evolving a whole lot as far as I know.
True. Yeah.
But what's in your mind is the bulletproof. That's the stuff that you can get better and better and better and better at it. And then you start experimenting more and more and more with creative stuff. And the technique and the technical stuff starts to take way more of a backseat and it's more automatic. And that's the people that I see with, when I see Dylan's work and I see people like that, people that I've always looked up to, that's there in everything they say. You can, whether he's saying it explicitly or not, you can see it's there.
Excellent. And I think that's a great, perfect person to use as an example. And it's something that gets easily overlooked. Like, and just to ask you that specific thing. So whenever you saw these changes, whether it was like, industry shifts or just different tools, different mediums, because that pretty much you've used it all. How did you did you ever get shook with any of these? Or was it always a case of like, oh, that's new, let's just see what I can do with it? Like, what has your attitude been towards these things? Because sometimes you can be intimidated by things and you want to stick with what you know. And I think that's a route to a lot of some of the anxiety people have. And then sometimes it's like, oh, something new, let's dive, head first, forget feet first.
Yeah, there is a way to look at it, which is that, not everything is, you could learn everything, but I don't think you necessarily should learn everything. I think that there is such a thing as too much, where you're overwhelmed with the amount of tools that there are. To me, the easy way I've been able to navigate that, and I'm not the most technical, so maybe you shouldn't ask. I'm not the best person to ask. There are people who are way better at everything, Blender and using Substance Painter and using ZBrush and integrating all these different things. That's great. I've never been as interested in learning it just to learn stuff. For me, it's what are you learning? What is the part that you're doing now that is so bothersome to you that this tool would solve that problem? So like for me, one of the big ones was when I'll go through a few, like learning 3D initially, we learned how to draw, traditionally, and how to draw a column of sci-fi pillars that are, rotating in space. Now there comes a point where you realize like, well, I mean, I could draw it 6 times, or I could just copy and, I can copy it in Photoshop and warp it. That was like that's old school. But at one point that was the new way of doing it. And then it became, well, that seems kind of dumb. You could model it once and you can rotate it as many times and pose it as many times and make a scene that then you can work on top of, paint on top of. And that became a way. Now that is old school. And then it became, well, if you get better at materials and you start learning materials more, you're not painting over a 3D model. You are rendering a 3D model with textures, with materials, and creating shaders and materials of your own, lighting it yourself. And then you're painting to un-3Dify it, right? You're painting to make it look like an illustration and not like a 3D rendering. And that to me is that's like an evolution right there of like you're picking up new tools when you need it, when it can help you. If you like, if you like sculpting in ZBrush or modeling, in a voxel based program like 3D Coat, and you're sculpting these really high poly robot sculpts. I've done several workshops where using this method now. with the Armada series with you guys was one of them. Well, when you're flying those into Octane, you can have as many materials on those things as you want. And then each one of them could be like 5 million triangles, and you've got 10 of them instanced in your scene, and it doesn't even care at all. So that's a reason to use Octane, because I'm not saying everyone should. I'm saying if you like to work that way, it's very friendly to you. You drag in a super high poly spaceship with emissive materials and metallic materials and shaders that you've applied to it. Well, Blender's going to have an argument with you at some point. If you try to do that and you keep adding and adding and adding, it's going to start chugging. Octane, it takes a hell of a lot for Octane to start chugging when you have a good graphics card, right? So the math just works out differently. The way it renders, the way it computes using the GPU is just different. So you're using tools that are friendly to the process that are right for you. Again, super long-winded answer, but what I'm saying is, like, you should think about the tools, try to minimize, not make it as many tools as you can use, make it as few tools as you can use, and use the ones that are right for what you're trying to do. If Blender is just a must because you really I want to be able to mesh paint Ivy on these ruins that I want to do, and you think that looks better than any other way that you could do it, then that sounds like the way you should probably do it. But just learning every add-on and every single thing that comes out, I feel like that's a bottomless pit. The flip side of that is I have friends like my friend Robbie Johnson, who is I worked with him at Naughty Dog for a long time. He's such a genius with learning new tools and finding cool ways to use it. Him, I wouldn't give that advice to. I'd say you get your inspiration by learning some new thing, because you can, and you get really good at it, and then you do these amazing results with it. I am not as good at that, so I wouldn't do that for myself. But for him, it works perfectly. So, that's kind of the bottom line, is whatever works for you the most.
Going back to traditional medium in general, we'll get to ink and obviously the course soon. But putting ink to one side, what mediums and even tools have you fallen in love with over the years? Obviously, there's a difference between being able to use them and execute them to the goal that you need. But there's some of those tools that you just, when you pick them up, magic's going to happen. Whether you like the end result or not, you just know it's going to be fun. Or otherwise.
Are you talking about traditional tools?
Yeah.
Gouache has a thing. I mean, acrylic. I'm tough because I love all. I'm going to tell you why I love them all.
Go ahead.
My favorites. Acrylic is one of my favorites because despite people thinking, I used to think it was very plasticky and you weren't able to get rich pigments and you weren't able to get rich colors in it. And then I saw my teacher, Gary Meyer at Art Center, use it in a very painterly way in portrait painting in class on a live model. And I've seen Mike Hernandez do it as well. And I realized that's actually not true. It depends on the artist, because some people can get a quite beautiful result out of it. And it really comes down to how you paint with it. Now, it dries very quickly. I fell in love with glazing and mixed media techniques with it, because you can use glazing mediums and get very quick glazing buildup, which is for people who don't paint. It's like a transparent layer that, imagine how sap looks on a tree. The light just glows through it, right? So transparent glazing techniques, like Rembrandt is probably the most famous artist of all time that used it pretty religiously. Builds up color in a way that lets it glow, in a way that opaque painting just doesn't. Sargent doesn't do glazing. He is more of an alla prima painter, so it's a different look. So acrylic, for that reason. Gouache has a silky smooth look to it that is unlike any other medium on the planet. This velvety, flat finish and really, really juicy, rich pigments. You get these tiny little tubes, and you wonder, how am I ever going to do a painting with that? Well, as soon as you start painting with it, you realize it's the most concentrated, potent pigment concentration that there is of any paint. And the binder is just this sticky, it's much more rich, right? So for me, gouache is great for going outside landscape painting and also for illustration as well, because you can re-wet it after it dries. That's super sick. You can work with pastels with it, as I mentioned before. And yeah, it's softening edges after it dries. There's nothing, acrylic can't do that. Oil can't do that. That's one of the only ones that does that. So that's kind of actually an interesting reason, but that's why I love that. And then, for some reason for me, like even since I was in high school, like the black and white media of all the types, like everything covered in this course, everything that you see on my Instagram, I've always had some version of that going on, and I could do it with pretty much anything. I just love the exercise of value control is, I have to say this ink brush stuff was magic as soon as I picked it up, because I just realized like it's kind of a hybrid of all the things that I love. It has a brush like gouache, it feels like a real brush. It has values like markers, and you can make it like markers where you're mixing up multiple brushes with different values, right? So it's almost like a combination between gouache and markers, if you look at it that way, or something like that. Which is, and you can use gouache with it, which I've done as well. So yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
And what would you say to people who, because you mentioned a few times there, like about you're basically adventurous with the tools, how to use them, maybe break the rules with them. As long as you get some result, you're happy to try them, right? And the ink, these brushes, I've never put ink in these. I've always had water in them, use it for watercolors. I never ever thought of putting ink in them. Obviously, when you start using it, it's like, of course, like all the things you mentioned. Now I've got my Copic marker in one place, I've got my watercolor in one place, and all these kind of good things as well. What would you say to people who are like only stuck with the rules of what I guess the mediums or the tools are meant for, if that makes sense?
Sometimes it's for good reason. Like, I'm sure that ink clogs them more than watercolor would, because I clog mine. I go in the course. Maybe they're not strictly made for that, but I certainly have found a good way to use them like that, and it works just fine. I think it's great to test things out in a way that sound interesting, but that being said, some of them, the rules are for a reason, I think, and sometimes they're not. It's sort of just, I would just tell everybody to experiment with different stuff, and you might find a certain combination of, you might hate these pens, but then you use it on a different paper and you realize I was using it on the wrong paper because this feels like magic. Even my sketchbooks, I have a bunch of different ones and all the paper is slightly different. And if I'm trying to do a certain type of drawing on one, the amount of texture and tooth that the paper has, it's too absorbent. It's like cloth almost. You're like, you got to it wants to be really heavy. Like you got to be heavy handed on this paper. And on this paper, it's silky smooth. You want to be very delicate because if you're too heavy on it, it buckles, you crush the tooth, all these things that you learn in school. It's all about experimenting and finding the right combination. And once you find your flow of like, it's got to be this brand and it's got to be this paper, there's nothing wrong with having your right setup, that works for you. The F301, the zebra on certain types of paper is magic. It's like straight up on parchment paper, not parchment, on moleskin sketchbook. It's like ninja stuff. It's so smooth, like a katana sword. So it's all about experimenting. That's what I would say, to find the right combination that works for you and the way your hand is.
How many? Obviously, it's hard to not even really keep track of these, but how many hours have you spent in traditional medium?
I don't know, man. I mean, I've been using it since I was a kid, like a little kid. So I couldn't even tell you. About tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands. I don't know how many hours are in your lifetime, but I mean, most of my life has been spent doing it. There's a very small amount of time where I wasn't doing it. As I said, like those few years in the middle where I was really enthralled in my digital work in that one era is probably the only time where I wasn't doing it. So I couldn't tell you. Like it's a lot, most of my life.
So ink, specifically ink, what's your backstory and what's your, I guess, origin story with ink and why it features heavily it is basically what the course is about. It's like ink sketching is it's not even a course, like a series broken up into multiple courses. What's your origin story with ink and why is it important for you?
Okay. So that one is a cool story, actually. So I had this sketchbook from when I was in college. My mom bought me the sketchbook when she was in Venice, Italy. She went on a trip with a friend a long time. I can't remember how she got it, but she brought me back this sketchbook. And I didn't really appreciate. I loved obviously everything that I had art wise because I just lived and breathed art. So it was just one of the many sketchbooks that I had. But it happened to be one of the handmade leather sketchbooks that is the ones that you see my drawings. It's a brand of the ones that I use now.
Oh wow!
It comes from Venice, Italy, and you can still get them there. I know you're going to ask what the model is. I have absolutely no idea. I would have to do some research and get back to you on that. There's a watermark on the paper that I can barely see, and that is how I got more of them. But I don't remember how I got more of them, to be honest. So that sketchbook that had a drawing in it, a drawing that I really liked, and it was a drawing that we listened in a class called Narrative Illustration. We would listen to books on tape of poems that were read by poets, and then we would sketch in these sketchbooks while we were listening to whatever. It could be lyrics from a Johnny Cash song, it could be Edgar Allan Poe, it could be anything. And so this one sketch that I did in this sketchbook was in ink, but it was brush ink. So it was India ink using a brush, not these pens. They didn't exist back then. And years later, I found this sketchbook, and I'm like, that's a pretty dope sketch. I was 19 when I did it, probably. And I'm like, it's primitive in terms of technique, but the idea is cool, and damn, it looks cool on that paper. So then I started drawing in that sketchbook, and I was like, started out by drawing with, whatever I had. And then I looked at it and I realized like what made this so sick is this watercolor brush. So then I looked up, are there refillable like ink brushes? Like I've seen Pete Hahn drawing with these brushes a lot. And I've seen some of my friends drawing with brush pens, but I had never seen anyone using these. And then I found some online. It just so happened that the ones that I ordered first were the ones that I really liked, the way they felt. I've been using them ever since. That was in 2018 when I got back into it. My wife was like, you should just start drawing again. And then one day I sat down and I just started drawing. And it's just one of those things. It's hard to get into a routine. Anyone knows this. If you get out of a routine, it's hard to get back into the routine. But once I sit down and I start, I've decided that's it. I'm starting today. Today's the day and we're doing it. And I started drawing in the sketchbook, and I went to the Grand Canyon. I sketched there, and I sketch in my living room, and I bring it with me to meet up with friends and all this stuff. But the impetus of that was this old sketchbook my mom bought for me when I was a teenager from Venice, Italy, and that is what triggered this kind of journey of getting back into ink again. I was always into black and white drawing, as I said before. Mm-hmm. Markers, I did a ton of markers in college. Mm-hmm. Very well versed in Copic marker drawing and more Viscom style, like industrial design, more that drawing. But then I started using this technique in more of an illustration way and hybridizing it, as I've said, where it's kind of blending the two. And that's kind of where this technique falls in for me. It's kind of like a new way of working that is like a hybrid between the way I would draw with markers and the way I would paint with paints. But it's like somewhere in the middle, if that makes sense. It's very weird to describe it that way, but yeah.
And what was the trigger for that? Like, was it just a sake of efficiency, or was it a case of like, I don't want nothing too cumbersome?
Yeah. So drawing with like, I've usually in years past, going into the graffiti and all those other things, you draw with like regular pens, like the Zebra, like a ballpoint pen or a felt tip pen, whichever. They're both slightly different, but they're going to give you a black line of some sort. And that's how most people draw. When they bring a sketchbook, they draw with a pen or even a pencil. I never really like to draw with pencil because I'm too heavy-handed. I smear everything with the palm of my hand. It just ruins it. I don't know how some people, my friend Izzy would have like a glove with a thing so he can rest his hand and not, for me, that was too much. I never really wanted to do that. So for me, ink is better because I can brush my hand across it all I want. It's not going to move. So that's why I would start drawing in ink. But to me, it just never felt like punchy enough. So that when I started drawing with these other brush pens, it was all the things. I can be super aggressive and painterly. I can be super precise. I can complement it with those felt tip pens and more of the more precise brush pens like the Pigmas and some of those Japanese pens that are phenomenal. And so, yeah, it just kind of answered all of the things that I really wanted, and a little bit more of an exotic look than just ballpoint pen. which I still will do. It feels, if you give me the opportunity to noodle and to build up the values really slowly, I probably will. But if you take that opportunity away, like there is no building up slowly as easily with these. Even if you have a very light value, it's still like a wash, like a wet media, which means you have to be very intentional in what you're putting down, which means I have to be a little bit more intentional myself. So it forces me to be more aggressive with what I'm very aggressive is one way to say it. Another way to say it would be purposeful. Boom, I'm putting this down. Yes. That's what I'm putting down. And it's fun. It's more fun for me than the very slow buildup of the soft ballpoint pen drawing style. Both cool, but I did enough of that in my earlier years. And now this is what I like more, if that makes sense.
A bit earlier on, you mentioned obviously like the journey you went on with basically reconnecting with sketching in this particular way. And obviously offline, speaking about the course, you mentioned this as well. Talk to me about that adventure. Like, what's it been like getting back into ink? And like you said, the course was basically, I know you reveal how long you spent on it, but like every day was just meditating over these sketches and obviously these pieces and the stuff you're putting online as well. Like, just to watch, they're just beautiful to watch. But then obviously to appreciate from technical term and all that kind of stuff, it's just a 360 amaze fest. But yeah, what's the story behind that? Like getting back into this kind of artistry.
Well, thank you for the kind words. First of all, yeah, it's been a long time. We started having conversations in me doing a new course. I think it was years ago, honestly, that we started talking about it. So it's been a long buildup of getting there. How much? What was the first question?
Like how just much? More to getting back into like the sketching side of things, because you said like it's changed the way you think and it's changed the way you've kind of like thought about just connecting with art again.
Yeah. Sorry. It's again, I'll say the same kind of similar way I said it before, which is I didn't know how much I needed it until I started doing it again. The lapse was really like, it was really real. And I never felt I haven't felt so good in a long, long time. But when I got back into sketching, I remember my wife took me to the Grand Canyon for my birthday one year. It was like 2018. And I remember drawing and carving out time. I got up at sunrise to go sit out there on the ledge and draw in my sketchbook. I posted those images are up on my Instagram, but that was like, I was like, man, I feel like I was born again. Like I needed so badly to be doing this. And it doesn't mean that I put away my digital work. I still do enjoy digital work in so many different ways. Like I love modeling still. I love rendering. I love figuring out cool materials. I love playing around with renders and all of the above, digital painting, everything. I'll never stop enjoying that stuff, I think. But the traditional media has just such a life to it that the more and the more I go into this, the digital world is around us. It's getting more and more. We all are under the spell of like trying not to doom scroll our way through an hour and a half of your day and you feel hungover after you've done that. People talk about this kind of stuff a lot, of just being surrounded by not only digital media, but these very quick gratification, instant gratification of everything all around you. Everything's just the click of a button, the flick of a wrist, just the thought, and things appear. Your phone's listening to you at all moments, so it's just it's feeding you things that it knows you want. But the reality is that what nurtures us the most is the human things that are going to go on forever, like getting outside, going on a hike, doing some physical exercise, listening to some live music from a person, not like something on Spotify, but going and this is, again, I'm just saying this is all my opinion. Don't take it with a grain of salt if you don't agree. Sure. But and as an artist, you probably should do some real drawing. for your brain, to save your brain. I don't know. Maybe not everybody feels that way. Maybe some people, I know people that are pretty happy, like going to work, doing some 3D modeling, clicking around in Blender, and then playing games at night. And that's what they do. And that makes them happy. And I'm to each their own. I want everyone to be happy. So if that works for you, then cool. But for me, I never knew how much I needed these things until I started doing them all consistently. Physical things, outside, real, meeting up with people face to face, coffee, whatever, a beer, whatever it is, and sketching and being the tactile experience is it's like a medicine for me. It's like essential. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Of course. Similar kind of journey in terms of like, I just picked up watercolors again, and before I got to uni and before I discovered markers and then eventually digital and all that kind of stuff, a bit similar to yourself, it was a case of that used to be my thing, and obviously just, you know, head down on a paper, on a sketchbook, as cool. And I totally agree with you as well. Like, it's not about dismissing all the other stuff. Like, it has its own place as well. But there's just something that kind of offer, that just mark making and solving problems and all that kind of good stuff as well. And one thing, and we'll get into the course now, of course, is, yeah, you do that throughout the course. Like, with every piece you're doing, you're not only teaching us how to do this and why this is useful and what you're going to gain from it, but you're also having a conversation almost with your sketchbook, with the pen, with your tools, and all that kind of stuff as well. And that's probably a unique experience that I don't think you can get if it wasn't a traditional kind of course. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the one unicorn of the whole thing. Like, it, yeah, I don't think you could get that experience without it, to be honest. I feel the course is pretty unique. The way I approach every course, by the way, is I try to create a course that I wish I would have had when I was, learning. You know, it's the course where I take all the best ideas that I learned from my instructors, and I often credit a lot of them because it was so meaningful to me. But I crystallized down into a course of like, those were all good. And if I had learned it this way at this time, I would have gotten even more from it. And some of them, like, I had to take their classes like 2 or 3 times in order to really understand what they were trying to say. You know, like, it doesn't sink in until you have enough skill and practice. And of course, they were able to explain it that way because they had the skill and the practice to explain, like, no, this is what I mean. And after years of practicing it, I realized, like, now I did it by accident. And now I see what you actually meant by that. And then once you do it by accident, eventually you start doing it on purpose. And that's where you want to be. You want to do things on purpose, not by accident. But when I approach these courses, I try to give people something that is unique, and that is a culmination of all my own experiments and experiences and my trials and errors, and explaining to people several things. So, like, one of the things that I think is really important that they can get from it is, a lot of people show like the most badass process you can do, which is, we've all done that too. Like, just the hardest flex, like the coolest, make it look as cool as it can be. But to me, I also want to highlight, this is an area where I messed up, and I want to show you how to recover from the tailspin of when you do mess up, because we all do. No matter how good you are, you make mistakes. And I think the point is, when you make a mistake, you have to, most especially with traditional media, you have to be able to course correct from something that didn't go the way you wanted. So one, to explain to students, like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, I didn't want this to come out this way, just so you understand. Like, this isn't the best thing I've ever seen. I tried to do everything the way I wanted it to be, and it just didn't quite come out that way. I think that's something artists don't talk about enough, is that, look, you're wrestling with something that's physical. It's not exactly like you're going to be the same artist every single day. Some days you got it and some days you don't, right? And we all experience that. The point is that doing it enough to be able to operate with a certain level of consistency. And so I'm trying to give everybody the experience of, like, understanding that process and what things you would want to be what things you do in order to recover from those those mistakes, I guess. So that's one of the things that I think is unique about it that you can't quite get any other way. If we're talking about like Blender, like I guess, yeah, there's some things it's like this is how to troubleshoot when your normals are not looking right or there's a rendering error or whatever, but it's just a little bit different than like, hey, look, I know you're struggling today. I get it. Maybe the humidity in the air. I know this is going to sound stupid, but the humidity in the air affects the way your ink or your paint dries. Anyone who's ever been a landscape painter knows this. If it's windier, you're not getting the same acrylic that you were yesterday. Your acrylic is not the acrylic you were using yesterday, the gouache, whatever. Why does it seem to your eyes like it's drying darker today than it was yesterday? Yeah. And you were doing exactly what you thought was the same thing you were doing yesterday, but today it feels different. I understand that as much as anybody. And so I'm trying to help people understand, like, not only is this the difficulty in it, this is the beauty in it, is the unexpected results that can happen from that experimentation. And this is like, to me, this is like my style of teaching. Like, I think it's more fun to see the behind the scenes than it is to see the most badass flex where I'm deliberately hiding all the mistakes from you. I've made demos like this, by the way, where I made all sorts of mistakes and things that I redid and I cut it out and I made it so you can't see. That's fine. But sometimes it's kind of fun to see like, oh, that's crazy how you turned this into that, or, that's one of the biggest things for me on this one.
Oh, totally. I mean, we've all been there where and it could be for anything, whether you're just putting a piece of furniture together, following a tutorial, a recipe, what have you. You follow it step by step, but it doesn't tell you the steps in between the steps, or that time when you put salt instead of sugar, for example, like how to kind of undo that kind of thing. But it's also interesting what you mentioned as well, like
that was terrible.
It's a different dimension, almost like you said, like humidity. You're dealing with the elements, for example. Like, imagine, and I think it'd be actually quite interesting as well, but like, I'm sure someone's going to make a plugin for it. If that affected your, GPU in a way, and it affected your render in a particular kind of way, like, it's almost like, it's like cooking and back to alchemy, like, certain things, how they're done at a certain time in a certain condition, give a certain kind of charm and a character. And that's the things that make things magic almost. So that's also one of the fun elements just of working traditionally, in my opinion, as well. But with the course itself, we've got 8 lessons. But before we get into like what you teach, what tools do people need to bring? Because normally with digital stuff, it's a case of which software, how much, computing power do I need, and any peripherals. Now, yes, you need pens. You can use pencils if you want to as well. But there is a minefield of all these different tools and pens and inks and how much you can spend also on a budget as well. So break it down for everybody. What do they need to bring at least an entry level before they get going?
Well, if you're on a budget, the good news is that it's a very low budget operation. It's not, you don't need to buy a slamming gaming PC with a amazing NVIDIA card in it. This is like, spend $10 on pens. You can have a sketchbook that you order online, $20 for a handmade sketchbook that's pretty decent, and you're kind of off and running. Like the pens and the tools are cheap as any can be. I mean, obviously you don't want to go so cheap that they're not working well, but I mean, the cost is the good news on this one. It's really the barrier for entry is very little. It's really, really easy. The Aquash Pentel brush pens are very inexpensive. I recommend getting a variety pack that has multiple sizes, maybe even multiple tips. Some have like a more filbert type of tip, and some have more of like a round, sharp tip. I think a variety of tips is good. Variety of sizes is good. And you can get some that are pre-mixed with black in it. Those are cool too. Or you can get them that are empty and you mix your own values, which is what I'd recommend doing. The more advanced lessons that we get into, I start explaining that stuff more, really controlling your values and more complicated compositions. But you only need like 3. You get one that has pure water. You get one that's super dark, like black or close to black. And you get maybe one that's like almost just pure water, a little bit of ink. So it's like a value, but a very faint value. And then you get one that's more like a mid value. And that's it. That's one pack of those pens, one little bottle of India ink that'll last you literally years, probably, or a year at least, unless you're really cranking these out. And I hope you are. Hope you're burning through India ink like a monster. But likely it'll take you some time because it's mostly water. So those are your brush pens. You want a Zebra F301 ballpoint pen, a click, refillable. You're right. You have the cartridges that you can refill them. It's an amazing ballpoint pen. You want maybe like 1 or 2 felt tip. You can use a Sharpie, a thin Sharpie. You can use a Pigma or a super thin Sharpie felt tip pen. Those are phenomenal for the inker, comic book inker pens. Any of those are going to be good because you want something that can do some line work if you want to work that way. And you want, you want some type of a sketchbook or a watercolor pad. The sketchbooks are great because they're really durable, and they're portable. So that most of my work that you'll find on Instagram was done in those sketchbooks. And there's just a million of them online. The one that I have from Italy, and when I went back my wife and I found, I think it's the same shop that she must have got them from.
Cool.
Those are great, but I've got friends that order them online and they're just as good. There's so many handmade watercolor sketchbooks. And the good news is you can paint in those if you want to add gouache to your workflow. You want to have like recycled paper that have got weird like flecks of colors and weird stuff in it because who knows where they got that paper from. Yeah. There's just a trash pile that they just turned into paper. Honestly, it sounds silly, but the more grimy, like the better. They're rough and they're durable and they're really nice to draw on. Especially with this technique. That's all I'd say. Other than that, if you want to do more of a style that doesn't involve the watercolor look as much, that's a primary focus of the course. But if you want to do the course in like a stippling style or a more line drawing style with markers, you totally could. You just want probably something more like a marker paper or something that's more slick. And that would be the only change I would make. Other than that, you're good to go. It's very inexpensive.
And all this is, you go through it in detail in the course. So there's a list, obviously, you go for the tools, what they do, how they perform. And one of them you definitely spend a decent amount of time explaining and almost fawning over is this. What's your story behind the zebras or the zebras?
They are, so I think what happened, I was trying to remember the story I was telling you before. I believe what happened is I just wanted a ballpoint pen. So I went to the like office supply spot by us and I got like these ballpoint pens. I didn't know what they were. I think I was probably 18 or 19. I was 18 for sure. I remember because it was right before Art Center. And when I showed up on the first day in my I think it was an analytical figure drawing class. The teacher had us he broke out this pen. And I was telling my buddy at orientation, I'm like, dude, you draw creatures, you draw monsters. My friend Jared Morantz, we were just starting out school together. And a lot of people know him as this, incredible creature guy that he is. But we were just starting out, little 18-year-olds. And I had a sketchbook full of like figure drawings and cool graffiti stuff. And he had a sketchbook full of like these sick creatures and demons and monsters. And I'm like, dude, if you like drawing these crazy demons, you should try this zebra, this F301. And then the next day we went into class and the teacher, Ray Bustos, was like, this is what you're going to be drawing with the entire class. And he looked over at me and he's like, damn, you figured out the secret. I was just like, is this an accident? It's just total coincidence. I didn't know that was the best pen. But still to this day, we're talking 2001. To this day, I'm still using that same exact pen on my desk right over here. It's the best ballpoint pen ever invented. That's the fact. I mean, I don't know how anyone could argue with that.
And what's also cool as well is how you use all of these things. Like you're not kind to them, but you're respectful to them. Like if you need something, you use them. You're not precious about them, but you make sure they do the work for you rather than you kind of like bend your, like in reverse, right? Have you always been like that, or is that something that you kind of had to learn to break free from?
I struggle with it because when I have a materials like a tool that I sometimes am a little bit like I don't want to get rid of it because I like the way it feels. And as soon as you get a new one, even if it's a brand new one, it's just not the same because it's not broken in and it's brand new. So sometimes I have to force myself like, no, you're ordering a new pack. Like forget about these. They're not working perfectly anymore. Even if the tip feels like how you want, you got to just order a new one and just start from scratch and break those ones in. But there is something to that idea of like, you get the new pen, you put the ink in it, and it's just like, it's like too much ink coming out. You're like, because you got used to the one you were using that is like just the right amount of ink coming out. And that happens, it gets broken in over time. And I don't know how to explain it, but everybody's going to comment and they're going to say like, my pen is just like clogged, or my pen is just gushing ink everywhere. And I'll say, I know. I've never figured out how to fix it. You just figure out how to roll with it. That's the deal. So you're blotting it. And then eventually you're like, oh, it's stopped doing that. It's not doing that anymore. It's actually doing all right now. I don't know why. Some clog and some don't. Trust me, I've tried everything. Take the tip off, boil it in water, try to clean it, do everything you can to fix it. Try whatever you want, but they're stubborn sometimes. It doesn't always work out the way you want. But yeah, that's I've always had the same thing. I've always kind of been like, I don't want to let go of them because I like them, but at the same time, you got to be like, nah, it's time to let that one go because it's just not working. It's holding me back now, right?
So we've got in ink sketching fundamentals. We've got 8 lessons: basic sketching technique, watercolor ink, stippling, hatching, thumbnail sketching, simple values, simple perspective, and fully composed pages. Now, what's cool about this, obviously when everybody signs up and check it out, they all have different subject matter. We've got things from landscapes, we've got things from environments to characters to scenes to thumbnails to design explorations, but yet they all stick to the fundamental themes. And why would you teach it in that particular way rather than the more, I guess, rigid, just a box saying this is how to do this technique, that technique, and that technique? Like, why do it almost through play?
Well, I think a lot of so I'm trying to teach fundamentals in a fun way where I think a lot of stuff, like if you teach a perspective class. So again, I've had perspective classes that are fun and they make it interesting and usable. And then I've had other ones where it's so rigid that like it's hard for a beginner to even see how that could apply to anything other than just miserable mechanical process. So I'm trying to teach like the bare minimum, like this is how you apply perspective. Like this is, if you're working on a thumbnail image, this is the basics of how you would apply perspective to that so that you understand, like, are we doing an aerial shot? Are we doing a low eye level shot? Are we doing 2-point perspective? Like, but not everyone can open up a perspective book. It takes 5 seconds to look that up online or on your phone and be like, okay, I see what that is. But that's not the point. The point is like, how do you actually apply that in real time and not waste a bunch of time plotting things out? That's the way I teach stuff. So on the fundamental side, that's what I would have to say about that. And in terms of the other, like teaching, the other really important part to me about the fundamentals is that give people a variety of techniques to arrive at the same kind of cool result or slightly different result, but a variety of different techniques that might make them happy. I know people like my friend Eitan, who has done a lot of these great stippling style drawings in his sketchbook. He's got this really small sketchbook that is like, oh, it's perfect for small scale to draw in a stippling style. It's beautiful. It's a look that like nothing else, right? And so there's all these different techniques like that: hatching, cross hatching, stippling, scumbling, like all these different kind of ways of working that are like, well, hey, I don't know what kind of method people might enjoy the most. Why don't I give them all the tools to choose which way they want to work and show you all these different methods that you may not. Most courses would just give you, this is the way I work. You're going to learn the way I work. And that's just what it is. For me, I'm like, I like working all the different ways. So why would I focus on one when I can give you all these different vibes that like maybe one of them really speaks to you and maybe that makes you excited. So, that's the difference in the way I kind of approach a fundamentals course versus the way some might be very prescriptive, right? I don't want to be like that as much.
It's also very interesting because as you're showing the techniques, you're also talking us through what you're drawing, what you're designing, what you're creating, and how you use those techniques to either solve that form, that shape. I mean, you talk a lot about what you're intentionally doing with those things and why I'm using this shape. I love in the watercolor section where you're talking about you're designing the mountain and the rocks, and basically you nerd out about you study like rock formations or like the language of like the rocks and everything and try and use that in there.
Yeah.
And then there's another anecdote where you mention, and it's like it is scientific, but in an artistic kind of way. So when you're talking about figures and you're talking about faces, you're not critiquing it, you're not disparaging it, but you're saying the understanding of it, like the way the human brain critiques faces, like you have to spend more time or put more effort in that particular thing versus say other things as well. That is one aspect or element of the course that I really found super, super useful, is almost being part of that conversation as I'm learning all these techniques as well. But speaking of the different techniques that you showcase, and that is the best way to go, like here's all the different kind of ways you can, do your thing, take your pick and go have fun.
Yep.
Which one do you prefer, or rather, which one do you find yourself gravitating to more towards the most?
What's funny is even when I try to do the same technique, it sort of changes from piece to piece.
Right.
I like doing, first of all, I kind of like changing the way I work a lot because it gets too repetitive if I don't. So I think that's what led me to this way of being like the way I am with drawing, is I think that if I do the same way too many times, it feels like it doesn't inspire me as much. So to me, providing new challenges of ways of working are the most fun. I really enjoy a method where you are blocking in like graphic elements of a piece, and you're using the values to almost like you're drawing like in a painterly way. So you're carving out the areas that are going to be light. Let me take it back for a second. I think I figured out how to answer your question and not sound like a crazy person. I like to draw in a way where as I'm going, I'm creating fun little problems to solve for myself. So I know that I'm going to have this big cloud formation or smoke that's coming from from a locomotive, or this light is cast on the side of this temple or on the side of a face, or whatever it is. And so I know from the beginning, I need to carve out those spaces where the light is meant to be white of the paper. Don't touch it. Don't even touch it, because that area needs to be handled very carefully and with very light values, because it's going to be grouped. Value grouping is going to be very light there. So I like to draw in this very painterly way where I'm planning out a painting, right? It's a sketch, but I'm thinking of it as I'm planning out a painting. So I'm going in and I'm very carefully carving out those areas that are going to be left the white of the paper. And I'm knowing like, I got a plan for this. This area, I've got this solved, and I'm going to not touch this because I'm going to come back and handle it later. And I'm very methodically going and blocking areas in, knowing like this area I can just hit with a super hard wash, aggressive. And it looks like, whoa, what are you doing? Like you're being like, how are you going to, that looks reckless, but you've already planned what that's going to be. So I know I can block that in super aggressive with one dark wash in this entire area, because I'll wait till that dries and I'll go back in and draw a second pass with that same dark color and block in details like a painter would. That's exactly painting. That's not drawing. And again, drawing is painting, and that's a whole other class that I would love to teach someday. But the idea is that I like this methodical way of working where I'm like thinking 2 steps ahead. It's perfect for watercolor, for ink sketching like this, because you have to. But I like this methodical kind of painterly way of drawing. And that's the easiest way of kind of describing it. You're creating little mini problems that you're solving as you go. And that's super fun and very rewarding in the end. And when you see the image in the end, you can't tell how it was done. You can't see the process. Like the tracks are covered. It's like covering your tracks in the snow. You can't see all that. You can only see it when you're watching. I got the
magnifying glass and everything. I tried to look. I thought, let me zoom in. And then you zoom in. I kind of know and I kind of don't. And I think that's the charm of it as well. Like in the end, it just becomes the image that it's supposed to be, rather than like, the marks and the techniques. You obviously can do forensics on it, but not in a way where it kind of takes away the charm of everything. And I think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's my favorite. That's for sure my favorite. I think that's my, and it ends up manifesting in different looks. So when you ask me which technique, sometimes it's a little different than others, but that's always the approach, is some version of that.
Couple of questions before we wrap up. First one is obviously this is the fundamentals course. They're the first of 4. Obviously, the others are available for pre-order, but they're not out yet, and all information will be revealed closer to the time when they're released. But if you could give us a little bit of a teaser as to what we can expect from these future courses.
So I wanted to do, so the whole point of this was that, so just to give a little bit of context, if you look at my, last several years of drawings, I've sort of focused a lot on landscape, and a lot of environmental sketching, just mostly because I just really enjoy it. And a lot of it happens being out in the field and being inspired by what you see. So that's a landscape, right? Most of the time. But my background is way more broad than that. So number one thing was that I wanted to provide a variety of different subjects. And so the course after the fundamentals is more of natural landscapes and going into my methodology for how I look at trees and how I look at clouds and how I look at landscape and going into the traditional classics of like a landscape painter and that mindset. So the next course is architecture and hard surface, which is a little bit of a change from the previous one. I like the contrast of the two, so you can see how you'd approach natural subject matter versus something hard surface and more rigid with the same tools. So imagine drawing something vehicles built in the 1920s with ink wash technique is for some people sounds very intimidating, but I kind of have a whole method for how to do this. So it hopefully demystifies some of these very difficult sounding challenges. And then obviously how I go through architecture and different styles of architecture, everything, all the way through vehicles to interiors even, which is something that is very daunting for a lot of people. So I kind of go through it all and show how you would change your technique depending on the subject that you're doing. And then the fourth one being the advanced course, which is it's advanced, but it's the way I would describe it is it's the real me course. It's the one where I'm doing all my techniques. I'm pulling all the stops out. I'm showing how to do very complicated scenes and how I kind of plot all that out and how I go and block, most importantly, how I block that in, how to block it in and how to render up a scene that is 10 characters in it, 15 characters in it, or a entire, aerial view of a crowd of people and doing that in ink. It's, there's different ways to approach all these methods. So it kind of goes through, I think, it's an advanced techniques course, but it's the most me one of all of them. So it's super exciting.
And final question before we head off. You've definitely given us, I guess, bullet points along the way, but a quick summary of what would you like students to gain the most from this course? And equally, what should they bring with them, whether that's a mentality or even, specific kind of skill sets before they take the course?
If I had to pick one thing, I think the thing I'd like people to get from it the most is understanding that we touched on it a little bit before, but the fundamentals that are so valuable from the course, the fundamentals that you sort of focus on in this course are things that can stay with you forever, no matter what methods that you decide to go with, whether you decide, maybe ink drawing isn't for me, or you say ink drawing is my favorite thing now, I'm going to do this for the next 8 years. The fundamental, it's a great medium for learning those fundamentals, and those can be carried into every other thing you do. It'll make your modeling better. It'll make your digital painting better. It'll make every other aspect of what you're doing better, in my opinion. And that's probably the number one thing that I would like people to take away from it is really have sharpening your perception of how these fundamentals can be seen in everything that you're looking at. And when you're designing your own compositions or you're designing your own illustrations and whatever one of these courses you gravitate to the most, I hope you love all of them, but whichever one of them speaks to you the most, there is that in all of them, that focus on the fundamentals. So that's kind of the number one thing that I would like people to take with them. And what I'd like people to bring to the course is just removing any preconceived notions of what something has to be. A lot of people go and they think, oh, we're drawing today. Well, drawing is just a word that doesn't really mean you're making marks on paper. You could be thinking of it as drawing. You could be thinking of it as painting, but don't have any preconceived notions of what you think it's going to be like, because all it takes is one good way of explaining something that connects with you, and it will unlock an entire new category of work that you might start to make as a result of that. It's happened for me from teachers that I've had that have explained it in a slightly different way, and a world opened up to me of a whole new potential that I didn't even know that I had. And so it's some of this like blockers in your brain that of where you think it's going to be a certain way. If I do this, it's going to be this, or this is the way I've seen people work, so that means that's the way you have to work. That can only hold you back. So I think that open-mindedness and willing to experiment and try new stuff is gonna unlock a lot of potential. That's what I would like people to come in with.
Sick. Ink Sketching Fundamentals is out now, and the series can be pre-ordered. Super excited for what people are going to be doing. Also myself as well. There's just, like you said, like all you need is minimal stuff. I can do that whilst I'm rendering something, waiting for it, and just doodle it alongside as well. Aaron, so cool chatting to you once again. Super excited for the course. Thanks so much for jumping on.
Thank you so much. Can't wait.
A huge thanks to Aaron for another epic episode. Sign up for Ink Sketching Fundamentals today and save even more by grabbing the entire Ink Sketching series as a bundle. And if you listen to this when it airs, then our 50% off Black Friday sale is waiting for you. Simply hit the links attached to this episode to take advantage of it. I've been your host Aaron Danda. Till next time.